And real quick,
It's
I
bad.
just wanted
It's so bad. Dak
I just
Prescott,
real quick
terrible.
want to talk about Dak Prescott.
Yeah, go ahead. Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 3 of season 3.
Just a reminder, we release episodes every week and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It's currently Wednesday, January 17th, 2024 at about 8 p.m. Pacific time as of us recording this.
Yeah, and we think that this probably will be a fairly light show. And Charlie, we're going to start with the Iowa caucuses, which had the result that essentially all of us expected, at least at the top. Trump won. He got roughly 50% of the vote, just over 50% of the vote, which is kind of what polls showed. What was far more interesting was the race for second place in Iowa. DeSantis, he won second place, but he beat Haley by about 2 points, but both of them were roughly at 20%, so both trailing Trump by about 30 points, Charlie. This sparks the question, is the race over?
I mean, based on what we're seeing, I think so. I just don't really think there's any path for Haley or DeSantis to catch up to Trump at this point. But given what we've seen, I think it is really over. I think after New Hampshire, if Trump is as dominant in New Hampshire as he was in Iowa, I think it is absolutely over. But we shall have to wait for the New Hampshire caucus, which I think is next week.
Yeah, that's next week, and that debate that was scheduled between DeSantis and Haley not going to go forward. Haley, a clear favorite over DeSantis in Iowa. She maybe has a very, very slim chance of winning the state outright, but I still think unlikely. I still think Trump will win that state. I mean, Trump won every county in Iowa except for one, which Haley won by a single vote. I think that this race is certainly over for DeSantis. I mean, this is an embarrassment for DeSantis. Sure, he came in second, but he threw all of his chips into Iowa. He got the endorsement of everyone that he needed to get in Iowa. Did a full Grassley, visited every single county in Iowa, all 99 of them. There should really be 100, Charlie. We could talk about that in another time. But all that for 20% of the vote. Haley didn't even focus on Iowa. She almost beat DeSantis in the state. DeSantis is dead. Haley is probably dead, but I would at least argue lives to see another day. Charlie Vivek Ramaswamy, fully dead.
Yeah, his campaign was over. By the time he dropped out, he was polling about 7% in Iowa, and I think even worse in New Hampshire. But as he's now dropped out, he's thrown his full support behind Donald Trump.
Because of course he has. I mean, we saw the similarities the whole time. He's also learning the hard way that the far right, despite his claims, is actually pretty racist and will say some pretty terrible things about him, which also leads me to kind of one of my final points about these Iowa caucuses, which is that, according to entry poll data, 80% of Republicans that voted in these Iowa caucuses agree with Trump's comment that's straight out of Mein Kampf that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. I mean, that's horrifying, but it also shows you why Nikki Haley has absolutely no shot. 80% of the Republican electorate in Iowa believes that Nikki Haley has poisoned blood. Yeah, they're not going to vote for her. Of course they're not going to vote for her. And I mean, there's plenty of horrifying plot points with the entry poll data. An overwhelming majority of people thought the election was stolen. A majority also said that a Trump conviction would mean they'll still vote for him. It would be nothing. But 28% of people still said that if he got convicted, then he would be unfit for office. And Charlie, I mean, just from a political standpoint from the Republican Party, it's not a good thing because Trump is going to get convicted. It's a question about whether it'll happen before or after the election. He will be convicted. And if 28% of the most conservative electorate in Iowa caucus history believes that would make him unfit for office, that's not a good sign for the party as a whole if they go forward with nominating Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's let's move on now to Congress, who actually kinda did something. What's up with them?
Well, Charlie, they didn't really do something. They did the same thing that they've done several times, which is that they're in the process of passing a stopgap spending bill, a continuing resolution, this one going till March. Still no actual real budget for this fiscal year, because of course there's not, because they are still all incapable of doing actual governing. They continue to prove it over and over, but it's at least good to see that the government probably won't shut down, that they're at least willing to pass continuing resolutions, even if it might cost Mike Johnson his job at some point. There was some talk of him, was kept going back and forth. Was he going to continue on with this agreement that he signed onto? He ended up abandoning the budget that he had negotiated with Democrats in the White House and Senate leaders because it would have cost him his job as Speaker, and instead is now pushing for something farther right, but has agreed to keep the government open. So they still can't govern, Charlie.
Yeah, they can't. So let's move on. So yeah, relatively short politics section. Let's move on to world events now. When we have a theme here: missiles. Colin,
Lots of missiles.
care to start us off with what's happening in Yemen?
Yes, and this is honestly fairly closely related to what's happened with Israel and Gaza. The Houthis in Yemen, they had in essentially protest to what Israel was doing in Gaza and American support for it, they decided to start sending missiles towards Israel, as well as blocking ships from passage, like really important container ships from passage that affected like supply chains. So the U.S. understandably was not happy about this, Charlie, and they have started essentially bombing the Houthis, which is
for those who are unaware, who are the Houthis?
they're not great. I think that essentially the best way to describe them is that they brought slavery back to Yemen, Charlie. Responsible for numerous civil rights violations.
They're a group fighting against the government of Yemen. And
yeah.
The other key thing is that Yemen is backed by Saudi Arabia. Both of those countries are Sunni Muslim, whereas the Houthis are Shia, the other major sect of Islam, and it is believed that they have backing from Iran, who is the major Shia power in the world.
Yeah, and we're seeing the far left just as outraged about this as they were about Israel, Gaza, including there was a march in which there was a chant of Yemen, Yemen, make us proud, turn another ship around. So a couple things. First of all, I think that it is completely fair to have good faith disagreements about whether it's right to do airstrikes against the Houthis. Totally reasonable arguments on both sides, and I'm not even going to try to make an argument on either side at the moment. But you can do that without A, wanting our supply chain disrupted, and B, praising the Houthis, who again are not good. Just like objectively, they brought slavery back to Yemen. Slavery. So it's not about human rights. You can't say, oh yeah, they're doing a good thing because they're helping the people of Gaza here, and they're stopping them, or they're trying to stop them for being a genocide there. Like, while the Houthis themselves are violating people's civil rights. It's just an argument that does not add up. The only thing in common between these people who are supporting the Houthis and also backing Hamas in Gaza, hatred of Jews. That's essentially it. Always rooting against the Jews, Charlie.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's get to the other missile-based part of our world events section. Following a bombing in Iran last week that killed over 100 people. This was at a memorial for Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed by a U.S. drone strike in 2020. There was a bombing at a memorial for him that killed over 100 people, and Iran has responded to this by launching strikes against targets in Syria, Yemen, and Pakistan. to quote, whenever they want to threaten the Islamic Republic of Iran, we will react, and this reaction will definitely be proportionate, tough, and decisive. That was from Iran's defense minister, who I'm not going to try to pronounce that name.
Do you have
Now
a
it's
stat
time
for us,
for
Charlie?
stat of the week.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's pretty clear that the Pistons may finish with the worst NBA record of all time.
Yeah, it's going to be close at least. 4 wins at the moment.
But this led me down a thought of how bad can we really get in the NBA? I mean, records-wise, I think everyone knows 2012 Charlotte Bobcats are
Yep.
statistically, in terms of record, the worst. But I was wondering, who has the worst point differential of all time? So that's the question for today. Which NBA team has the worst point differential in a season?
I'm supposed to name the team and the season, yes?
Yeah.
I don't even know how I would start to answer that. I really have no clue.
I don't blame you. This was one that I looked pretty deep into. It was the 92-93 Dallas Mavericks with a final point differential of negative 1,246.
This was 82 game season, yes?
82 game season. They finished with a record of 11-71.
And a point differential of over negative 1,000.
Yes.
That's so bad. It's difficult to comprehend, Charlie. That is it. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Let's now move on to sports.
And the other interesting thing
we'll
is the fact that throughout the season they had 2 win streaks of 2 games, and that was how they got 4 of their 11 wins.
The longest win streak was 2 games. I mean, I guess with 11 wins, that's not that surprising. Yeah, let's move on
the
to
Pistons
sports.
have a win streak of 2.
Okay, yeah, fair. Let's move on to the NFL playoffs, Charlie, and I guess we'll go here in chronological order. We'll start with that win by the Texans over the Cleveland Browns. What are your thoughts on this one?
I mean, when it comes down to it, CJ Stroud played out of his mind for his first playoff game, and the Texans defense stepped up when they needed to. 2 pick six from Joe Flacco.
Yep.
This Texans team, they're getting hot right when they need to. If this defense can do what it did last week, they might be able to upset Baltimore. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. I mean, I've said this while I was watching the game. The first half of this game was the half of CJ Stroud. Just an absolutely tremendous performance. But the second half, Charlie, it was that Houston defense, like you said. Just electric. 2 pick sixes on back-to-back drives. Kept the Houston offense off the field for almost all of the third quarter. Just a really impressive game on all sides of the ball for the Texans.
Now let's get to the night game. The Chiefs beat the Dolphins in Kansas City with a wind chill in the negative 20s.
It's cold. It's very, very, very cold, and I don't think anyone's really surprised that the Chiefs were able to pull off yet another playoff win. They will have to go on the road, though, for the first time in Patrick Mahomes' postseason career. But Charlie, I want to focus on the Dolphins with this game. I think that the Dolphins were the biggest frauds in the NFL all season.
I think so.
I believe one win over not just a playoff team, but the team that had a winning record. That was a win over the Dallas Cowboys, who we'll get to in a second. But Charlie, just absolute collapses from the Dolphins when they really needed to play well in big games down the stretch. Obviously, they lost twice to the Bills. That's how the Bills won the division. But they lost to the Ravens. They lost to the Chiefs in Germany. I mean,
this brings up a question.
Yeah, it's bad.
This brings up a question, and that question is about Tua. Because his contract is expiring pretty soon here.
Yeah.
Do they stay with him? And is Tua a game manager quarterback?
Okay, so Tua has what? Does he have a year left, or is it?
I think he has 1 year left.
I stick with him for the year, but I mean, you gotta see more results than we've seen so far. Dolphins now, after the Lions broke their playoff winning drought, which we'll talk about in a minute. I believe it's the Dolphins that now have the longest drought. They've got to get at least a win, and possibly even farther than that, in order for me to truly believe that Tua is worth continuing with.
The last time the Dolphins won a playoff game was, I believe, the year 2000.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It's been longer than either you or I was alive by a considerable amount, Charlie. Let's talk about my favorite game of the week, and I'm guessing yours too, the Packers and the Cowboys. Final score of this game was 48-32. That does not represent how the game went. The score with 6 minutes to go in the game before the Packers pulled Jordan Love was 48-16. Just an absolute implosion yet again for the Dallas Cowboys in the postseason. Every single year it happens. I wasn't sure if it would happen this round. I thought they'd at least advance past the Packers, but Charlie, since the Cowboys' current stadium was named AT&T Stadium, which was in, I believe, roughly 2010, the Packers have more playoff wins there than the Cowboys do.
I want to give you another stat about this.
What?
Despite starting in existence in 2002 and not making the playoffs for the first time until 2011, the Houston Texans have more playoff wins than the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah,
in the 21st century.
Yeah,
and real quick,
it's so bad. Dak Prescott, terrible.
Want to talk about Dak Prescott?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because every single year, he is a pretty good regular season. Let's see, who do they play? They play
he was
an
MVP candidate in the regular season.
I'm gonna pull up their regular season schedule because I'm pretty sure I said this before the playoffs. But
you did. Just Charlie, let's be fair. Let's at least be fair. They did have a really good regular season. Dak Prescott, in particular, had an MVP caliber regular season.
I'm gonna get to that because let's look at who they played. They played the Giants, the Jets, the Cardinals, the Patriots, the Chargers. They played the Giants again. They played the Commanders twice. They played the Panthers.
No, their schedule was easy. I'm not denying that.
They had a ridiculously easy schedule, and whenever they played a decent team, I know they play Philadelphia hard. That's a divisional game. They got beaten by Buffalo. They barely survived the Lions because even though the Lions should have won that game, the refs gave them that one.
Yeah.
And yes, they beat the Rams. They lost to the Cardinals, and they got smacked by the 49ers. But, okay, great. Prescott has a good regular season. Yeah, he usually does that because he's pretty good in the regular season. You can't give him MVP unless you see what he does in the playoffs. And you know what he's going to be doing in the playoffs because he's done it every single year. He has one of the worst playoff winning percentages of all time. He's up there with Alex Smith.
Yep.
So until he gets some playoff success, I don't want to hear it. I know Dallas fans are some of the most pretentious people on the planet. I don't want to hear it. All right? Until Dak Prescott can prove to people he can win in the playoffs, he will not be a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah. No, I agree
with
that.
I was not
arguing he was a top 5 quarterback. I was just saying he did, in fact, have
I've heard people say that. Season. He's not.
Sure. No, he's not.
Now let's get to the Lions.
What an unbelievable win.
What an unbelievable win. I believe their first playoff win since the Soviet Union collapsed.
I believe so, yeah. Just unbelievable, and to do it at home too, in front of an electric Detroit crowd. It was unbelievable atmosphere in Detroit, an unbelievable win. It was clear the direction that the game was going, even though the Rams did make it very close near the end. Obviously, the big storyline of Jared Goff, who was kind of abandoned by the Rams. Stafford comes in, former Lions quarterback, leads them to a Super Bowl win. Goff getting some revenge. Just a feel-good night in Detroit, honestly, Charlie.
Absolutely. Not so much in Philadelphia.
Oh, no. Philly was a disaster. They finished
the
season, 1-6. 1-6. Jason Kelce, his career is over. He's announced his retirement after just a legendary career. Obviously a first-ballot Hall of Famer, nothing but respect for him. But that's a big loss for the Eagles, and really nothing to show for it this year. Just an absolute dumpster fire down the stretch.
Absolutely. Could have locked up the division, could have the Packers.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the coaching carousel, because we have openings in DC, in Seattle, in Carolina, in LA, the Chargers. We don't know what will happen with Sean McVay. In Tennessee, and we have some huge big name coaches. We have Belichick. We have Harbaugh. We have
Yep.
Pete Carroll. We maybe have Nick
Belichick.
Sirianni.
Yeah, Belichick interviewing in Atlanta, which has got to be the most awkward interview of all time.
Name a time where you overcame adversity.
Yeah, that's got to be
That's gonna go well.
awkward. Yeah.
Where do you see Belichick going?
I mean, I haven't heard of him interviewing anywhere besides Atlanta yet. I don't know if he goes anywhere, honestly. It seems like he probably still wants to coach. There's plenty of teams I think would take him, but like, is he going to be okay with any team? I don't think he's going to Dallas. I would really, really like those rumors to stop. Bill Belichick and Jerry Jones would maybe have the worst relationship of all time. And anyway, Mike McCarthy, for some reason, it looks like he's going to stay in that job anyway. So it's dumb that Mike McCarthy gets to keep that job, but even if he didn't, Belichick still wasn't a good fit there. He won't be next year either when McCarthy hopefully does finally get fired after leading them to yet another early playoff collapse. And then Charlie, in the college football coaching carousel, Kalen DeBoer gone from Washington.
I know you're happy about that one.
That's a big opportunity for DeBoer, but also a lot of pressure. You have to match some unbelievably high expectations, honestly higher than deserved because of what Saban did, and he should do it with DeBoer's never been the best recruiter. A lot of players leaving Alabama in the transfer portal. His first SEC game is against Georgia. That's
gonna be fun.
Not the best situation for DeBoer to be in. Personally, I would not want to be the guy that succeeds Nick Saban. I'd want to be the guy that comes in after that guy flames out, when the expectations are a bit lower. Washington now hiring Jed Fish as their new head coach. Charlie, I'm wondering what you think about kind of the state of coaching in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of different. I think college football is a lot more situational at times than the NFL program. There's just some programs where you know that you're not really going to go anywhere, like Vanderbilt. And then, but there's also a lot, considering that there's just more teams. There's a lot more teams that think that they can compete. And that's why that's such a competitive coaching market.
Yeah,
but I think we're going to Alabama really, really hurts UW, who now has Jed Fish, the coach of the former coach of Arizona.
Not a bad coach either.
But
no, still a lot of work to do.
Certainly not. But we'll see what they can do with losing a lot of their team and losing their coach.
Yeah.
But as crazy as college football's been, nothing beats college basketball.
Yeah. Before we get there, just one very quick comment on this, which is, people often point in college football to part of the problem being the transfer portal. Look, I understand why DeBoer went to Alabama, but with the state of coaching, you cannot argue that is the biggest problem when coaches are leaving faster than players are leaving. I'm sorry, you just can't. This is not on the players for the most part. Like, you just hold the coaches to the same standards if you're whining about the transfer portal. Please. All right, college basketball. Just unreal. We talked about a few last week, but then there were more. TCU got a big win against Kansas last week. Then on Saturday, Houston, they beat Houston. Tennessee almost lost to Georgia, but they ended up surviving. But Texas A&M, an overtime win over number 6 Kentucky, a big upset there. Washington State, a big win over number 8 Arizona. I don't know where Washington State came from, but I mean, wow is all I can say to that. San Diego State going down big to New Mexico. Just Texas too, going down to West Virginia. I mean, it continues. It's absurd. Baylor, they lost on Tuesday to Kansas State, and TCU, they had 2 big wins against Kansas and Houston. They now lose to Cincinnati. I mean, it's wild, Charlie. It is actually absurd.
Oh, no, absolutely. Now, I don't watch much college basketball. I generally tend to wait for March. By the way, are we doing another bracket challenge like we did last year?
Oh, yeah, we're absolutely going to do another bracket challenge when the time comes.
But just hearing these matchups makes me want to watch a little bit more college basketball.
Well, I mean, the one thing is, you maybe noted, so many of those upsets were in the Big 12. Every single game in the Big 12 has a tournament-like feel because it's such a good conference. They might send 9 teams to the tournament, maybe even 10. And I mean, it's so deep. Houston comes in, undefeated until all of a sudden they dropped 2 of their first 3 conference games in the Big 12. Just an unreal conference. Good at the top, Houston and Kansas. Really good for throughout most of the conference as well. Just really, really impressive conference. Charlie, finally before we go, NBA, big trade went down. What do you got?
Pascal Siakam is going to Indianapolis. It seems like the Raptors are now fully committing to rebuilding.
Really feels that way.
But also,
Scotty Barnes.
Wow, they got a lot.
Centerpiece. They did get a lot for
the Raptors. Get Bruce Brown. Is that Jordan? How do you say this last name?
I have no clue. Jordan Nwora, I believe.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that. And not only do they get 2 first-round picks this year, they get a 2026 first-rounder as well.
Yeah.
But what do the Pacers get?
They get Siakam.
As well
as a second round
pick from the Pelicans. And how do the Pelicans how the Pelicans involved in this?
I'm not sure yet. We'll see. See how that turns out.
Yeah, I believe that they have not. That we've not learned what they get out of this.
Yeah, at least not as of this
Could
taping.
this just be a salary dump move by New Orleans?
Doubt it. We'll see.
We'll see. But with that,
that'll do it for this episode. Bit of a shorter episode, finally. Make sure you subscribe to the C&C Talks podcast. Yeah, episodes every week wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website, cctalks.com, has everything you need to know about the show. You can call us with your questions at 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. And follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast, and follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie. And join our Discord server, cctalks.com/Discord. We'd love to interact with you more there. All this information is in the description. But for now, for our producer Morris, production designer Zack, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie. We'll see you next week.